I have a confession to make, and the reason I have to confess this is because I've been working on something, and I've been working on it for a while, and it's a personal thing. One time, Duke had me speak, and after the service, he called me into his office, and he said, "You got to look at this tape." And I thought, oh my God, I've messed up. Well, I don't want to embarrass anybody in the choir, but it was summertime, and I was standing over here at the lectern, and sticking out from behind the little barrier there was a big, hairy leg. You remember that, don't you? So Duke said, "Sandra, you got to step away from the lectern, okay? Just step away from the lectern." And so I did. Well, then my next challenge was not using notes. He gets up here every Sunday. He doesn't have one note. It's all in his head. And I'm thinking, I don't know if I can do that. So then 2 Sundays ago after I spoke, there was a folded card in the offering basket. And Vilma gave it to me at our staff meeting on Tuesday, and I opened it. The person signed the card, but I couldn't make out the name. So this is my attempt to tell whoever wrote this how grateful I am, because you forced me out of my comfort zone. The person wrote, "Sandra, please, I ask, stop reading your notes." And a joke is only good if you tell it, not read it. Now, I could have been humiliated, but actually, that was a vote of confidence for me. I took that as encouragement. And I don't know who it is, but if you're here, I thank you. Because my talk today is about gratitude. There was a church, more fundamentalist than ours, where they were having some financial difficulties. And so the preacher stands up and he says, "You know, I want you to prayerfully consider putting just a little bit more in the offering plate when it comes around." Now, you can take this seriously because there will be an offering today. And he said, "Whoever puts the most money in the plate gets to pick 3 hymns." Now, we didn't have a hymn today. So whoever puts the most money in the plate when we take up the offering, you get to pick 3 hymns for next Sunday. When the plate came around, there was a $1,000 bill on the top of this stack of money. And the minister was just ecstatic. Now remember, this is more fundamentalist. So the minister says, "I don't know who gave this $1,000 bill, but I want to see this person. Come on, let me know who you are so I can thank you personally, show you my gratitude. We appreciate you." This little old lady in the back of the sanctuary comes tootling down the aisle with her cane. And she says, "I did." He says, "Miss Jones, we can't thank you enough. Thank you for such gratitude towards us, and we are grateful for you. Now you get to pick 3 hymns." Her eyes lit up. She scanned the sanctuary. "I'll take him and him and him." Now, Kathy's going to get a little mad at me, so I'm going to bring this out, because she said I go too far over there. You get a lot of instructions when you're up here. I hope somebody will take my place one day, because I used to sit where you're sitting for years and watch Duke prance across the stage. But when I first watched Duke, he was holding on so tight that this whole lectern was shaking, and we thought it was going to fall over. But look at him now, 20-some years later. I'm going to be there. I'm going to be there. So I want to talk to you today about gratitude. You know, we are doing a 6-week series. You remember we started just a few weeks ago. The Art of Living Together. The Art of Living Together. So Duke started off with spirituality and relationships. And the 4 words that he gave us were, "I wish you well. You stole from me. You hurt me. You lied on me. I wish you well." Not easy to say when someone does something that you feel harmed, right? But that's about forgiveness. And then I came up with the most important thing you can ever do in order to get along in this world is to love yourself. Because you cannot love anyone if you don't love yourself. And then last week, Duke talked about these unrealistic expectations that we have, where we set ourselves up for disappointment when we don't make it clear what our agreements are, or that we have agreements. For example, he gave us, you're having a dinner, and you tell your husband or wife, I need you to be here by 6 o'clock. And they say, I'll try. Well, you don't have an agreement. But if there's a commitment, I will definitely be there by 6 o'clock. Now you have an expectation, a realistic expectation. And so when the person does not follow through on that, right, you may be a little justified in your disappointment. But if you don't have that realistic agreement with someone, you can't be disappointed when they don't do what you in your head thought they should do, but never established an agreement. Do we agree? All right. So today, I'm going to throw at you the F word and the G word. I know what you're thinking. Some of you went there. That's not where I'm going. I'm going to start with the G word, and I'm just going to touch on the F word. You see, the first time I spoke on a Sunday after I became ordained, Amy Krinke, who was in our choir for many years, came to me in her robe with tears and said, you know, I grew up in unity. This is all I've ever known. I was born in unity. And I'm so glad that you're not afraid to use the G word and the J word. And it stunned me for a minute because I didn't know what the G word and the J word were. And she said, you know, God and Jesus. I said, well, we're based on Christian principles. That's what the Fillmores started. We're based on the teachings and the works and the life of Jesus Christ. We're based on the one presence and one power active in our lives and in the universe, God, the G word, the good, omnipotent. So no, I'm not afraid to use the G word and the J word. So where does the F word come in? I know what you're thinking. Forgive. Forgive. And when Duke talked about, I wish you well, what he was talking about was the power of forgiveness. No matter what someone else does, we have the power to forgive. That doesn't mean we condone the act. It means we're able to let it go. Let it go. But the purpose of my lesson today is focusing on the G word. Gratitude. Gratitude. The same kind of gratitude that the preacher showed to Miss Jones for putting that $1,000 bill in the offering plate. The same gratitude we show for all of those who volunteered to serve this church as our board. Those current on the board and those coming into the board, those past board members and future. The gratitude we have every Sunday when we hear our wonderful singers and musicians. As Jerome said, if I can change the world, what would it take? It would take me being grateful for every single thing. Everything. Scripture says, in everything give thanks. Not just if things are going well, but sometimes things we think are the worst things that could ever happen to us turn out to be our greatest blessings when we look back on them. So being grateful for everything. So I want to give you a little quiz, or I'll share with you a little quiz that was taken, a happiness quiz, and see how you fit. 5 people were asked at random to judge how happy they were based on a random set of circumstances. Of those people, several of them, 2 to 4%, increase their happiness quotient just by expressing gratitude to themselves. I love you, I bless you, I appreciate you to themselves. But expressing gratitude to yourself is like wrapping a gift and never giving it. It doesn't work. So that's why when they were talking about gratitude, how grateful they are for who they are, for where they are, for what they do, for what they have, their happiness quotient only increased by 2 to 4%. But of the rest of the group who were surveyed, when they talked about how grateful they were for their circumstances and other people in their lives, their happiness increased by 19%. So give yourself that test. How grateful are you for everything in your life? Wouldn't the world be something if we could just be grateful for everything? Even things that seem horrible can turn into something good. I want to share a story that I heard from a gentleman I met who I consider a very close friend. How many of you have ever heard of John O'Leary? He lives in St. Louis. And John O'Leary was playing with matches in his family's garage when he was 9 years old with a gasoline can because he saw the little boys down the street lighting sparks, and he wanted to do it. His mom and dad were away for the afternoon, and his oldest brother, 17, was babysitting. He was up in his room listening to music, and his older sister and younger sister were playing with dolls in their rooms. So John goes into the garage, and he starts lighting these sparks, and he sets himself on fire and the house. He goes running through the house, and he ends up in the front foyer screaming. The older sister comes out of her room and peeks out and shuts the door. She sees all this fire. The younger brother comes from his room, and he sees John. He wraps him up in the rug that's in the foyer, takes him outside. It's January, freezing cold. And he runs back in the house to call 911. He has his sisters stay there with John. The youngest sister loved John. She was 7. Oh, he was her hero. And so he said, I want you to do me a favor, because the pain was just starting to set in. He said, I want you to crawl into the house, crawl into the kitchen, reach up into the drawer, get a knife, and come back out and kill me. She crawled into the house. She reached up into a drawer. She came back out. It was a Dixie cup with as much water as she could fill, and she poured it in his face and said, live! Before the older brother caught her, she had gone into that house 3 times with a little Dixie cup of water and come back and said, live! John spent months in the hospital, bandaged from head to foot. All of his fingers had to be amputated. One side of his face is clearly disfigured. And he would think about, while he was recovering, how he used to sit on his father's lap and trace these big veins in his father's hands. And he thought to himself, if I ever have children, they won't get that experience, because his hands were so badly scarred, as was the rest of his body. So recently, John told the story of how his 4-year-old Grace was sitting on his lap. She was tracing the scars up and down his arm. She said, Daddy, you are so lucky. And she showed him on the side of his arm, the scars were shaped into the sign of a heart. You are so lucky. He looked down at his arm, and then he looked back at Grace, and he thought to himself, I've never considered that. He hadn't thought about what he thought back then about if he ever had children, not being able to have them trace the veins in his hands. But Grace saw something that he didn't see. And for the first time in his life, John had this overwhelming sense of gratitude for his scars. We all have scars. Some are visible, some are not. Wouldn't it be a wonderful world if we were grateful for every scar? John O'Leary travels the world inspiring people. His program is called Live Inspired. And he has a book called Ignite. And those of us who are his fans helped him with the title of the book, with a flame. One funny story that John shared, I have to tell you, that really grabbed me when I met him. He was here for the federal government's Unity Day, which is a community federal-wide event to expose us to positive, powerful things. And this has been a few years ago, and we became pen pals ever since. But John said that the day of the fire, he was so taken aback by his older brother. Imagine, he was 9, his brother was 17. I can identify. When I was 9, my sister was 19. My brother was 20. So here he has his brother, older brother. Now, if you know about older brothers and, younger brothers, there's a little bit of tug of war there. He said he showed on a screen what his brother, when his mother told him to fix John's lunch for school one day, what he fixed. He had a bottle of hot sauce, a jar of peanut butter, and 2 slices of bread. And when John got to school and bit into his lunch, he nearly died. So for him, for his brother, from a 9-year-old perspective, to take the initiative, to wrap him in that rug, to take him outside, to make sure he was okay, to get everything taken care of while their parents were away, was phenomenal. He never thought his brother would be that kind. But I can only imagine how grateful his brother is today for having been there for John, and how blessed his life has been. They say expressing gratitude makes you happier, and that people who are grateful are the happiest people in the world. I've known people who don't seem to have much, but their gratitude is enormous because they appreciate what they do have. Joseph Worthland said this: "Gratitude is the mark of a noble soul and a refined character. We like to be around those who are grateful. They tend to brighten the lives of all of us. They make others feel better about themselves. They're more humble, more joyful, more likable." So when we think about the art of getting along, really getting along, what's your gratitude quotient for what you have, for where you are? My good friend, Dr. Sonia Willis, is here, and I hope she won't mind me sharing this story. We started a group, a small group, and we plan to fan it out eventually, called Courageous Conversations Initiative Spirit Group. We've passed our spirit group deadline, so we're expanding even more, and we're getting to know each other on a deeper level and talk about those things that usually you don't like to talk about, and really open up and be authentic with each other. Well, Sonia has been going through a little bit of a flood experience. Sonia's an only child, and her mother is an educator and recently had a stroke. Well, Sonia didn't feel that relationship with her mother that she thought mothers and daughters might enjoy. And now that her mother is in a position where she's in a nursing home and Sonia's being her caregiver, Sonia's learning to practice both forgiveness and gratitude. Am I right, Sonia? Absolutely. Forgiveness and gratitude. The F word and the G word. Powerful words. No matter what happens to us in life, we always have an opportunity to forgive. First, forgiving ourselves. When Jesus answered Peter, "How many times shall I forgive? 7 times 7? Jesus said, "No, 70 times 7. And one way you can forgive is by expressing gratitude for whatever that person brings into your life. Now, speaking of bringing into your life and mothers and daughters, we have a celebration today. 48 years ago, a 17-year-old girl had a breech birth. Now, those of you who are mothers know what I'm talking about. Had no idea what a breech birth was. And 48 years later, one of the most dynamic women that I've ever known has emerged. My daughter, Tammy, is 48 today. Stand up, Tammy. And just in case you want to know, Tammy's the HR director at Village Shalom. So I'm very proud that a little 17-year-old, by the help of God and a lot of family, raised such a dynamic woman, daughter, mother, wife, sister, granddaughter, and niece, and cousin. It's all about gratitude. She always told me how grateful she was that I'm her mother, and I used to wonder, was she talking about me? I was just growing up, and she had to grow up with me. But by the grace of God, thank you, Tammy. You did. So the art of getting along is quite simple. Quite simple. Forgive. Forgive your enemies. Pray for those who persecute you. Be kind to those who mistreat you. Forgive. Start with yourself. Because what we see in others is a reflection of our own souls. Be grateful. Be grateful in everything without exception. On the front of your bulletin, I gave you a few quotes. I hope you'll take the bulletin with you. And look at those every day and think about, how can I raise my happiness quotient by being more forgiving and more grateful? I promise you, if you'll just put this to practice, one baby step at a time, your happiness quotient will go through the roof and you'll never be the same. Think about that as we move into meditation.